What the millionaire said that night changed everything. If you ask me to stop, I'll stop. No one imagined that a simple phrase would reveal the true meaning of respect and love. Where are you watching this story from? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because what happened next will truly move you. The scent of magnolias rose gently from the Georgia garden, mingling with the subtle aroma of Harrison's classic cologne, as Eleanor observed his hands trembling slightly. In this bedroom, bathed only in flickering candlelight, she felt for the first time in months that perhaps something authentic existed behind all this suffocating luxury. The most gilded cages are often those that imprison us most deeply, even when offered with love, she thought, as Harrison's fingers brushed her face with a tenderness that contrasted with the usual confidence of this 38-year-old man. "If you ask me to stop, I'll stop immediately," he whispered, his grey-blue eyes seeking confirmation in hers. She simply nodded, unable to formulate words. It wasn't just the nervousness of a wedding night that rendered her silent, but the vertiginous abyss of finding herself there, wife of one of America's most powerful men, when she had spent her whole life making do with little in the narrow streets of Savannah. The designer dress she still partially wore, a Carolina Herrera that her mother-in-law had insisted she wear despite her protests, seemed as foreign to her skin as the name she now carried, Mrs. Eleanor Blackwell. At 21, she had become the heir by marriage to a hotel dynasty whose properties stretched from Manhattan to the California coast, a world light years away from the dusty bookshop where she had worked since adolescence. "What are you thinking?" asked Harrison, his forehead creasing slightly. "I'm wondering if this is real," she replied with disarming frankness. "If I'll wake up tomorrow and discover this was all a dream." Harrison's smile illuminated his face, marked by early responsibilities. He took her hands, those calloused hands accustomed to carrying boxes of books, and brought them to his lips. "It's not a dream, but it's not a fairy tale either, Eleanor. It will be difficult." "My family, your family already hates me," she completed with a small, joyless laugh. "They don't know you yet. Give them time." But time, Eleanor thought, as she looked through the window at the impeccably maintained gardens of their Georgia estate, might never bridge the vertiginous chasm that separated the small Savannah bookseller from the Blackwell empire. The first official visit to the Blackwell family estate in New York was as cold as the Napa Valley Cabernet served in Baccarat crystal flutes. The 18th-century mansion in the Upper East Side seemed to physically embody intimidation. High ceilings adorned with moldings, masterpiece paintings hung with calculated nonchalance, silent staff appearing and disappearing like obedient ghosts. Virginia Blackwell, Harrison's mother, welcomed her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tall, elegant, her hair perfectly coiffed in a tight chignon, she resembled an animated wax statue. "So here's the girl who captured my son's heart," she said, examining Eleanor from head to toe. Her gaze lingered on the simple dress Eleanor had chosen, purchased in an ordinary Savannah boutique. Charming, so authentic. The word sounded like an insult, wrapped in a facade of politeness. "Thank you for welcoming me into your home, Mrs. Blackwell," replied Eleanor, unconsciously squeezing Harrison's hand more tightly. "Oh, we're family now, dear. Call me Virginia. After all, you could almost be my daughter, couldn't you?" The reference to their age difference hung in the air like a toxic perfume. Wesley, Harrison's older brother, appeared with his wife Beatrice. 2 years older than Harrison, he shared his features, but in a harder version, as if the same face had been sculpted with less compassion. "So here's the miraculous bookseller," he exclaimed, kissing Eleanor on both cheeks with excessive effusion. "We've heard so many things about you." "I hope they were good," Eleanor attempted with a nervous smile. "Interesting, let's say. Harrison has always had particular tastes." The lunch that followed was a succession of small humiliations. Conversations deliberately slipped toward subjects Eleanor couldn't follow, their holding company stocks, relationships with this or that senator, anecdotes about vacations in destinations she had never visited. "And you, my dear, how do you find the transition from, how to say, literature to luxury?" asked Lillian, Harrison's sister, delicately cutting a piece of sea bass. "It must be disorienting." Eleanor, who had just made the mistake of taking the wrong fork for the fish, felt her cheeks flush. "It's different, but fascinating." "Fascinating, really?" interjected Cordelia, the youngest of the siblings. "I imagine the income is particularly so." "Cordelia," Harrison warned, his voice suddenly sharp. What? Cordelia shrugged with feigned innocence. It's a compliment. Few people could adapt so quickly to a new lifestyle. After dessert, while coffee was served in the drawing room, Eleanor excused herself to find the bathroom. Passing a half-open door, she heard Virginia's voice. I don't understand, Harrison. She's pretty, certainly, but so young. And this provincial naivety, is this really what you want after everything that happened with Audrey? Mother, don't even think about it, responded Harrison's firm voice. Eleanor is not Audrey. And if you want to keep me in your life, you'll accept my choice. The name Audrey echoed in Eleanor's mind. Who was she? Why had no one ever mentioned her? That evening, in their Manhattan apartment overlooking Central Park, Eleanor observed Harrison as he undressed, removing his tie and with it the layers of social convention. Who is Audrey? She asked abruptly. His hands froze on his shirt buttons. He briefly closed his eyes before answering. A youthful mistake. Is that all you're going to tell me? It was a long time ago, Eleanor. I have the right to know. He sighed deeply. You're right. Audrey was my first wife. The revelation struck Eleanor like a slap. You were married before? For 2 years when I was 26. She couldn't handle the family pressure. One day she left, without explanation. And you didn't think it was important to tell me before our marriage? I wanted to protect you. Protect me. Her voice rose. Or protect yourself. Both, perhaps. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed. I was afraid you would back out if you knew. I might have, indeed. Eleanor crossed her arms, a physical barrier between them. What makes you think I won't leave too? Nothing. His gaze fixed on hers. And that's precisely what terrifies me every day. Harrison's private library became Eleanor's refuge. It was an imposing room in their New York apartment, where walls disappeared behind massive oak shelves loaded with ancient books. There, surrounded by the familiar smell of aged paper, she could almost believe she was back in her Savannah bookshop. It was here, exploring these shelves, that one day she discovered a carved wooden box hidden behind a row of first editions of Hemingway. Inside rested yellowed letters, tied with a faded ribbon, letters written 20 years earlier, when Harrison was a student at Yale. My dear friend, she read, her heart pounding as if she were violating an intimacy, your latest news has devastated me. Abandoning your dreams of writing to take over the family business is a capitulation I cannot understand. Your talent deserves better than to be buried under balance sheets and shareholder meetings. Letter after letter, Eleanor discovered a Harrison she had never known, a young man passionate about literature, who dreamed of writing, of living modestly in Key West, of creating something meaningful. A young man who had finally yielded to family pressure, abandoning his aspirations to become what was expected of him. As she carefully replaced the letters, an invisible bond wove between her and this Harrison from the past. She now understood his occasional melancholy, his sincere interest in literature, his way of sometimes looking out the window as if seeking an alternative world. And perhaps she also understood what he saw in her, a youth still intact, an authenticity that he had had to sacrifice. This discovery changed her perception of their relationship. The age difference took on new meaning. It wasn't just a matter of maturity, but of lived experiences, of paths taken and abandoned. The next day, she met her friend Phoebe at a cafe near Bryant Park. Phoebe had come especially from Savannah to see her, after weeks of sporadic communication. So the palace life? Asked Phoebe with a teasing smile, stirring her coffee. Eleanor hesitated. It's complex. Complex. Is that a euphemism for horrible? No, not horrible, just different from what I imagined. You've changed, Eleanor, observed Phoebe, examining her carefully. You talk differently. You carry yourself differently. I'm learning to navigate a new world. And does this world accept you? Eleanor thought of Virginia's coldness, Wesley's barely veiled contempt. Not yet, but I didn't come seeking their approval. No, Phoebe arched an eyebrow. Then what did you come looking for in this marriage? The question hung between them like a challenge. Eleanor realized she didn't know exactly what to answer. He's 17 years older than you, Eleanor, continued Phoebe, her voice now soft but concerned. He's already lived an entire life that you haven't even begun. Age isn't everything, protested Eleanor. No, but it's something. Look me in the eye and tell me you're never afraid he treats you like a child. Eleanor looked away, unable to deny. There had been moments, small condescending comments, decisions made without consulting her, when she had felt exactly that. A child playing in an adult world. "I love him," she said finally, "and he loves me." "Love isn't always enough, sweetheart," replied Phoebe, squeezing her hand. "Sometimes it's just the beginning of problems." The first real test of their marriage came in the form of an annual charity gala, organized by the Blackwell family for generations. It was a prestigious event that gathered the New York elite, politicians, industrialists, renowned artists, and raised funds for various causes. This year, Virginia had subtly suggested that Eleanor could take charge of the organization, to show she took her family responsibilities seriously. What seemed to be an offer of trust was actually a trap, as Eleanor quickly discovered. Every decision she made was scrutinized, criticized, often overruled. Her choice to bring in a Southern caterer was rejected in favor of the usual starred chef. Her suggestion of a literary theme was met with frowns. "A gala is not a children's birthday party, my dear," Virginia remarked during a planning meeting. "We don't play at dressing guests as Hemingway characters." "That's not what I was proposing," replied Eleanor, struggling to maintain her calm. "I was thinking of an exhibition of first editions, perhaps a silent auction." "Adorable," interrupted Virginia with a dismissive gesture. "But our guests prefer jewels to books. Beatrice," she turned to her daughter-in-law, "contact Tiffany for the auction lots." Eleanor felt her patience crumbling. "Why entrust me with this task if each of my ideas is rejected?" An awkward silence settled. Virginia stared at her with surprise, as if she hadn't anticipated resistance. "My dear child," she said finally, deliberately emphasizing child, "we appreciate your enthusiasm, but certain traditions must be respected. You'll learn with time." "I am not a child," retorted Eleanor, her voice trembling with contained anger, "and I don't need to be educated as if I were one." Harrison, who had remained silent until then, placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Eleanor is right, Mother. If we've entrusted her with the gala, we should respect her vision." Virginia pinched her lips, visibly displeased with this lack of support. "Very well. Do as you wish, Eleanor, but remember that our family's reputation rests on this event." That night, while Harrison slept deeply beside her, Eleanor remained awake, staring at the ornate ceiling of their bedroom. For the first time, she fully felt the weight of her choice. She hadn't just married a man. She had married a name, a history, a value system deeply rooted in generations of privilege. She thought of her own family, a mother who had worked as a nurse until illness prevented her, a father long absent. She thought of her childhood in a small apartment above a bakery, the thin walls letting in the smell of fresh bread each morning. She thought of her years of study financed by scholarships and small jobs, her pride in having obtained a position in that bookshop she loved so much. How to reconcile these two worlds? How to remain true to herself while adapting to this new reality? The answer came in the form of a resolution. She would organize this gala her way, not by imitating Blackwell standards, nor by naively imposing her vision, but by creating a bridge between these seemingly incompatible universes. The night of the gala arrived, transforming the Blackwell mansion into an unrecognizable place. Following her vision, Eleanor had created an experience that fused traditional elegance with an authentic warmth she had brought from her native Georgia. In the grand salon, precious first editions rested under glass, accompanied by Tiffany jewels inspired by American literature, a compromise she had negotiated with Virginia. The walls were adorned with quotations elegantly calligraphed by local artists Eleanor had discovered in the small streets of Brooklyn. A string quintet played compositions inspired by great American novels. The menu, developed with the starred chef but influenced by the southern flavors Eleanor cherished, combined sophistication and authenticity. A lobster bisque served with a subtle aioli, Georgia lamb with herbs, southern stuffed peppers reinvented as elegant amuse-bouches. Dressed in a deep blue gown, her first real concession to high fashion, created especially for her by a young designer she had insisted on supporting rather than an established house, Eleanor stood at the entrance, welcoming guests with a new confidence. "Mrs. Blackwell," murmured a senator as he kissed her hand, "what a remarkable transformation you have wrought. I have never seen this place so alive." "Thank you, Senator," she replied with a sincere smile. "I hope to create something memorable." "You've succeeded, my dear, you've succeeded." Throughout the evening, even the harshest critics seemed won over. The auctions exceeded all expectations, raising a record amount for the selected charity, an organization supporting literacy in disadvantaged neighborhoods, a personal choice of Eleanor's that Virginia had finally approved. Harrison observed his young wife with undisguised pride. She navigated between groups with natural ease, listening attentively, laughing authentically, creating connections without the usual artifice of these events. Even Wesley, after several glasses of wine, whispered to her, "Not bad, little sister, not bad at all." It was Virginia, however, who offered the most surprising compliment. As the evening drew to a close and the last guests headed toward the exit, she took Eleanor aside in a quiet corner. "I underestimated your determination," she said with reluctant respect in her voice. "You transformed our traditions without breaking them. It's impressive." Eleanor accepted the compliment with grace. "Thank you, Virginia." "Don't misunderstand me," continued the matriarch, regaining a bit of her usual coldness. "You still have much to learn. But perhaps you also have something to teach us." That evening, as they returned by car to their apartment, Harrison embraced Eleanor with particular tenderness. "You were extraordinary tonight." "I was terrified," she confessed with a small laugh. "I was certain everything would fall apart." "On the contrary," he kissed her hair. "You did something no one has managed in years. You made my mother smile sincerely." "A miracle indeed," she joked. "No, not a miracle." His gaze became serious. "It's your gift, Eleanor. You see people beyond appearances. You create bridges where others see chasms. That's why I married you." It was at that precise moment that Eleanor felt something change within her. For the first time, she no longer saw herself as an intruder in this world. She had found her voice, her place. Not by conforming to expectations, nor by blindly rebelling, but by remaining true to her values while respecting those of others. "I love you," she said simply. "And I love you, my Georgian lioness," he replied with a smile. "More than you could ever imagine." The success of the gala had barely had time to be savored when the storm broke. On a cold December morning, Harrison received a call that transformed his face into a stone mask. Eleanor observed him from the breakfast table, feeling anxiety rise in waves as the conversation extended in tense monosyllables. When he finally hung up, his hands trembled slightly. "What's happening?" she asked, pushing away her coffee cup. "The markets are crashing," he replied, his voice distant. "The economic crisis everyone feared has finally arrived." "How serious is it?" "Serious enough to endanger everything my family has built for 3 generations." He dropped into a chair. "Our holding company's shares have lost 30% of their value since this morning's opening. Our investors are panicking. Reservations in our hotels are cancelling in cascades." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emergency meetings, sleepless nights, and growing tensions. Eleanor watched, helpless as Harrison transformed. His eyes hollowed with deep circles, his laughs became rare, his patience crumbled. He returned late, sometimes at dawn, smelling of cold coffee and desperation. The family met daily in the conference room of their New York headquarters. Eleanor insisted on attending, despite Wesley's irritated glances that considered her presence superfluous. "We need to sell the least profitable properties," argued Wesley during a particularly stormy session. "The hotel in Boston, the one in Chicago, maybe even the one in Napa Valley. They're historic jewels," protested Harrison. "Properties that father acquired with vision. Selling them would be admitting defeat." "Defeat?" Wesley struck the table. "This is about survival, Harrison. We can't afford sentimentality." Virginia, unusually silent, observed her sons clash as if watching a theatrical performance whose tragic end she already knew. "And the employees?" Eleanor suddenly intervened, surprising everyone, including herself. "What about the families who depend on these hotels?" Wesley gave her an icy look. "This is a business meeting, Eleanor, not a charity operation." "People aren't lines in a spreadsheet, Wesley," she replied with quiet firmness. "They're the ones who make these establishments live." "And numbers are what determine whether these establishments survive," he retorted, "unless you have a miracle solution in your bookseller's bag." The sarcasm was evident, but something awakened in Eleanor's mind. An idea, fragile as a flame in the wind, but persistent. That evening, as Harrison collapsed exhausted onto their bed without even taking time to undress, Eleanor remained awake. her mind racing. She thought back to her years in the small Savannah bookshop, how they had survived against competition from large chains and online commerce. They had bet on what these giants couldn't offer: a personal experience, a unique atmosphere, an intimate knowledge of each customer. What if the Blackwell hotels did the same? Instead of competing with large international chains on their turf, why not create something unique? The idea grew all night, becoming clearer until dawn. When Harrison woke, he found Eleanor sitting at her desk, surrounded by scribbled notes and sketches. "You didn't sleep?" he asked, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "I had an idea," she replied, her eyes bright despite exhaustion. An idea that could change everything. When Eleanor asked to present her idea at the next crisis meeting, the reaction was predictable. Wesley emitted a dry laugh, Lillian and Cordelia exchanged skeptical glances, and even Harrison seemed uncertain. "Are you sure?" he asked her softly. "These meetings can be merciless." "I've never been more sure of anything," she affirmed, clutching the folder she had prepared all night. The conference room was tense that morning, the atmosphere weighted by the latest financial reports, even more disastrous than expected. When Harrison announced that Eleanor wished to present a proposal, the sighs of impatience were barely disguised. "We don't have time for distractions," protested Wesley. "5 minutes," insisted Harrison. "Give her 5 minutes." Eleanor rose, distributing copies of her dossier around the table. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was firm. "What I'm proposing is not a miracle solution," she began, deliberately meeting Wesley's gaze. "It's a fundamental reorientation." She explained how, in her view, the Blackwell hotels had lost what made them special originally. In their race to resemble large international chains, they had sacrificed their authenticity, their distinctive American personality. "Luxury has become generic," she continued, showing photos of 5-star hotels around the world. "A lobby in New York resembles a lobby in Tokyo or Paris. What travelers are looking for today is an authentic experience, not just standardized comfort." She proposed a radical transformation. Each Blackwell hotel would become a reflection of its region, an immersion in the local culture. The hotel in Charleston would celebrate Southern culture, the one in Santa Barbara, the American cinematic heritage, the one in Napa Valley, the history of American winemaking. Partnerships with local artisans, menus showcasing regional products, spaces redesigned to tell a story. "Instead of firing staff, let's train them to become cultural ambassadors," she continued passionately. "Let's transform each stay into a memorable experience that our clients will want to share and relive." She finished by presenting a detailed financial plan, showing how this transformation could be achieved in stages, starting with 3 pilot hotels, with a modest initial investment and potentially significant returns. The silence that followed her presentation was deafening. Eleanor remained standing, heart pounding, awaiting the verdict. It was Virginia who spoke first, surprising everyone. "It's bold." "It's absurd," corrected Wesley. "We don't have time for experiments. We need tested solutions." "Like selling our properties at a loss," replied Eleanor. "Like firing hundreds of loyal employees. These are your tested solutions?" "You understand nothing about business," hissed Wesley. "No," interjected Harrison, his gaze passing from the dossier to his wife with a new light. "I think Eleanor understands something we've all forgotten, the very essence of hospitality." A lively discussion followed, with opinions sharply divided. Lillian and Cordelia supported Wesley, arguing that the plan was too risky. Harrison defended Eleanor with growing conviction. Virginia remained enigmatically silent, leafing through the dossier with attention. Finally, she raised her hand, interrupting the heated debate. "I propose a compromise," she declared, her tone brooking no argument. "We'll test Eleanor's idea on a single hotel, the one in Charleston, which is in fact in difficulty. If in 3 months we see positive results, we'll extend the concept." Wesley began to protest, but Virginia stopped him with a gesture. "My decision is made." On the way back, in the car that returned them to their apartment, Harrison took Eleanor's hand and brought it to his lips. "You were brilliant." "I was terrified," she admitted with a nervous little laugh. "I can't believe your mother supported me." "You impressed her, and me too." He looked at her with new intensity. "You saw beyond our panic, beyond the usual solutions. You saw an opportunity where we saw only problems." Eleanor squeezed his hand, feeling a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. She had gotten her chance. Now she had to prove her intuition was right. The Blackwell Hotel in Charleston, housed in an old 18th-century mansion near the historic district, had become over the years an elegant but soulless relic. Luxurious rooms identical to those of any other high-end establishment, a restaurant serving standardized American cuisine, staff trained in distant politeness. Eleanor settled there for 3 weeks, sleeping little, observing everything. She traversed the city, from the picturesque alleys of the French Quarter to the modern university institutions, seeking to capture the essence of this unique city where culture and gastronomy had intertwined for centuries. Her first decision was controversial: to meet individually with each employee, from the manager to the chambermaids. She listened to their stories, their frustrations, their ideas. She discovered that a doorman played the cello in an amateur quartet, that a receptionist wrote stories inspired by Southern legends, that a sous chef had grown up on a farm producing the best Carolina rice in the region. "You are the true treasures of this hotel," she told them during a general meeting, "not the crystal chandeliers or period furniture. It's your knowledge, your passion for this region that our clients should experience." With the help of a young Charleston designer, she transformed the austere lobby into a welcoming space evoking a traditional Southern parlor, with local textiles, works by regional artisans, and even a large wood table around which guests could gather in the evening. The restaurant was completely rethought, abandoning its generic menu to celebrate Southern gastronomy, reinvented with refinement. The chef, initially reluctant, gradually became enthusiastic, rediscovering the recipes of his childhood that he could now elevate to the level of haute cuisine. Each room was personalized, telling a different story of the South Carolina Lowcountry. One dedicated to the Gullah culture, another inspired by the region's maritime history, a third celebrating the local culinary traditions. Perhaps most daring was the experience program she created: guided tours by employees sharing their personal Charleston, traditional cooking workshops, local wine tastings, intimate music concerts of regional music in the inner courtyard. Wesley, who visited regularly to monitor what he considered an expensive folly, didn't hide his skepticism. "You're transforming a luxury hotel into a folksy bed and breakfast," he criticized after a particularly tense inspection. "I'm creating an experience that no one else offers," replied Eleanor, exhausted but determined. "Something that clients can't find on the internet or in an international chain. The numbers will speak for themselves," he concluded coldly. And indeed, the numbers spoke. After a month of uncertainty, reservations began to increase, first slowly, then exponentially. Online reviews burned with enthusiasm. Tourism journalists asked to visit what was becoming Europe's most innovative hotel experience. What particularly touched Eleanor, however, was the transformation of the employees. Those who had previously mechanically executed their tasks now came to work with enthusiasm, continuously bringing new ideas. A community was forming, replacing the rigid hierarchy of the past. But success had its price. Eleanor was exhausting herself, neglecting her health, barely sleeping 4 hours a night. Her relationship with Harrison suffered from the distance, him in New York managing the global crisis, her in Charleston reinventing their future. Their phone calls, initially long and intimate, became brief exchanges of information. When they reunited for a weekend, a subtle distance had established itself between them, as if their lives were taking different directions despite a common goal. One evening, as Eleanor fell asleep over financial reports in her Charleston suite, her phone rang. It was Phoebe, her Savannah friend, whom she hadn't contacted in weeks. "You've disappeared from the face of the earth," Phoebe gently reproached. "I'm sorry," sighed Eleanor, suddenly realizing how much her life had narrowed to this single project. "It's just that—" "I know. I've read the articles about what you're doing. It's incredible, Eleanor." "You really think so?" "Yes." Phoebe's voice softened. "I must admit I was wrong about your marriage. I thought you would lose yourself in his world. But the opposite has happened. You're reinventing his world in your own way." These words touched Eleanor more deeply than she would have imagined. Was this really what she was doing? And if so, at what price? That night, she couldn't find sleep, confronted with a troubling truth. In her determination to prove her worth, to transform the family business, she risked transforming her marriage as well, not necessarily for the better. The triumph was as spectacular as it was brief. 3 months after the launch of the Charleston Hotel's transformation, the results exceeded all expectations. Revenues had increased by 40%, reservations for the coming months showed full occupancy, and even Wesley had to admit, reluctantly, that the experiment deserved to be extended to other properties. Eleanor should have been savoring this success. Instead, she stood alone on the balcony of her Charleston suite, observing the church steeples etched against the night sky, a barely touched glass of local wine in hand. The phone she had placed on the balustrade vibrated. A message from Harrison. "Congratulations on the numbers. Amazing work. Sorry I can't be there. Emergency meeting with the bankers. I love you." These last 3 words seemed almost an automatic addition, a polite formula rather than a felt truth. Eleanor wondered when their relationship had become so functional, so professional. A knock at the door interrupted her melancholy thoughts. It was Griffin, the new manager she had promoted, an energetic young man who had embraced her vision with enthusiasm. "Everything's ready for tomorrow's presentation," he announced, his face beaming with pride. "The entire board of directors will be present." "Thank you, Griffin." She tried to smile, but something in her expression must have betrayed her state of mind. "Is something wrong?" he asked, concerned. "You should be celebrating." "I should, shouldn't I?" She shook her head. "Don't worry, just fatigue." After his departure, Eleanor returned to her solitary contemplation of the sleeping city. Success had a strangely bitter taste. In proving her worth to the Blackwell family, in potentially saving their empire, wasn't she losing something more precious? The next morning, the hotel's conference room buzzed with anticipation. The entire board of directors had arrived, accompanied by Harrison, Wesley, and Virginia. Eleanor, dressed in an elegant but sober suit, prepared her notes for the presentation. Harrison approached, depositing a light kiss on her cheek. "Ready to dazzle the audience?" "As ready as possible," she replied, noting that he looked tired, his features drawn, new lines furrowing his forehead. Before she could ask how he really was, Wesley interrupted them. "Harrison, we have a problem." He lowered his voice. "The bankers called. They want additional guarantees for the restructuring loan." Harrison excused himself to Eleanor with a vague gesture and followed his brother to a corner, immersed in a tense conversation. Eleanor found herself alone in the middle of a room full of people waiting for her to prove once again her worth. The presentation started well. Eleanor presented the results, explaining how the changes had not only improved financial performance, but also revitalized the corporate culture. She presented her plan to extend the concept to 5 other hotels in the coming 6 months. It was during the question session that everything collapsed. A board member, a gray-haired man with a piercing gaze, posed an apparently innocent question. "Mrs. Blackwell, these results are impressive, but I wonder about the sustainability of the concept. Isn't it simply a passing trend?" Before Eleanor could respond, Wesley interjected. "That's exactly the question we should all be asking ourselves." What followed seemed like an ambush. Wesley presented graphs showing how similar concepts in other industries had experienced an initial peak of interest, followed by a rapid decline. He suggested that the investments necessary to transform the entire group, according to Eleanor's vision, would represent an unacceptable financial risk in the current context. "What my sister-in-law has accomplished in Charleston is admirable," he concluded with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But extending this, let's say, experiment to our entire portfolio would be irresponsible. I propose instead a hybrid approach, where some elements of her concept would be selectively integrated." Eleanor, stunned by this turnaround, sought Harrison's gaze. He seemed uncomfortable, but said nothing to defend her. The betrayal struck her like a physical slap. When she finally spoke again, her voice was calm but trembling. "What Wesley omits to mention is that authenticity is not a trend. It's a fundamental need. We don't simply sell hotel nights. We create memories, experiences that resonate emotionally." She stared directly at Wesley. "If you want to dilute this vision to the point of making it unrecognizable, then perhaps we should simply return to the previous model that was leading us straight to bankruptcy." An uncomfortable silence settled. Virginia, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "I think we all need to take a step back. Passion is admirable, but business decisions require reflection. We'll resume this discussion tomorrow." After the meeting, Eleanor rushed to her suite, tears in her eyes, anger and disappointment boiling within her. Harrison followed her a few minutes later, gently closing the door behind him. "How could you stay silent?" she immediately attacked. "Did you know what Wesley was planning?" "Eleanor, it's not that simple," he began, running a hand through his hair with frustration. "The global financial situation is even more precarious than you think. The banks are pressuring us. We need to make compromises." "Compromises?" She stared at him incredulously. "You call that a compromise? It's sabotage. You're exaggerating. Wesley recognizes the value of your work. He just wants a more conventional approach." "More controllable, you mean?" She shook her head, a painful realization imposing itself on her. "You never really trusted me, did you? All this support, all this encouragement, it was conditional, as long as I stayed within acceptable limits." Harrison approached her, attempting to take her hands, but she backed away. "That's not true. I believe in you more than you can imagine." "Then prove it," she challenged, her eyes bright with contained tears. "Defend my vision tomorrow, not a diluted version, not a compromise, the complete vision." He hesitated, and in that hesitation, Eleanor read his answer. Something broke within her. "You can't, can you?" she whispered. "Eleanor, I thought we were partners," she said, her voice barely audible. "But I understand now. I'll always be the young wife who needs to be guided, controlled, kept in her place." "That's not fair," he protested, the pain evident in his gaze. "You know I respect you, that I admire you. But you don't trust me." "Not really." She turned away, staring out the window. The Charleston steeples now plunged in darkness. "I need to be alone. Please go." After a long moment of hesitation, she heard his slow steps toward the door, then the soft click of the lock. Alone in the silence, Eleanor felt the tears she had held back flow freely down her cheeks. The success she had so desired was turning to ashes in her mouth. That night was the longest Eleanor had ever known. Curled up in the armchair near the window of her suite, she observed Charleston's lights extinguish one by one, until only a few scattered lights persisted in the darkness. Her phone, silent for hours, suddenly vibrated. She expected a message from Harrison, but it was Phoebe. "How did the big presentation go?" Eleanor stared at the screen, unable to formulate a response that would capture the extent of her disappointment, her anger, her confusion. Finally, she simply dialed her friend's number. "Eleanor?" Phoebe's voice was concerned. "It's almost midnight. Is everything okay?" "No," she replied, her voice breaking on this simple word. "Nothing is okay." She poured out everything. Wesley's betrayal, Harrison's silence, the overwhelming feeling of having been manipulated, used, then set aside when she became too independent, too bold. "I don't know what to do anymore, Phoebe," she concluded, exhausted by her own emotions. "I feel so lost." "What do you really want, Eleanor?" asked Phoebe gently. "Not what you think you should want, not what would impress the Blackwells or save their business. What you want, for yourself." The question resonated within her like a carillon in an empty cathedral. What did she truly want? She wanted to be respected, not just tolerated. She wanted to create, not simply execute. She wanted a partner who would support her unconditionally, not just when it served his interests. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not for what she could bring. "I think I need to leave," she murmured, surprised by her own words but feeling their truth, at least for a while. "Where will you go?" "Home. To Savannah. I need to find who I was before all this." "Your room is always waiting," Phoebe assured. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow, after the final meeting. I'll tell them my decision. Then I'll take the train." After hanging up, Eleanor began mechanically packing, each folded garment representing a part of her life she was questioning. She stopped while holding a silk scarf Harrison had given her during their first month together. The fabric slipped through her fingers like water, like broken promises, like time inexorably flowing. By dawn, she hadn't slept, but a new clarity had replaced the night's confusion. She took a long hot shower, dressed carefully in a simple but elegant outfit, and descended to the hotel restaurant for a breakfast she barely touched. Griffin, the manager, approached her table, concern visible on his face. "Mrs. Blackwell, is everything all right? The staff is worried. We've heard rumors." "What rumors, Griffin?" "That the project might be modified, that your vision might be diluted." She smiled sadly. "Rumors are often more accurate than we'd wish." "But it's your creation," he protested passionately. "This hotel has become what it is thanks to you, thanks to your faith in us. Guests come for the experience you imagined." His loyalty touched her deeply. "It's not just my creation, Griffin. It's all of ours. And whatever happens in this meeting, never forget what we've accomplished together." The conference room was tense when she entered. All eyes turned to her, some curious, others calculating. Harrison was seated near Wesley, his expression unreadable. Virginia occupied the central seat, straight and imposing as always. Eleanor took a place at the far end of the table, deliberately distant from the family's inner circle. "Before we begin," she announced in a clear voice, "I'd like to say a few words." Virginia nodded, granting her the floor with an elegant gesture. "Yesterday I reacted emotionally, and I apologize for that," Eleanor began, surprising everyone with her calm. "But my conviction remains unshakable. What we've created here is not simply a marketing strategy or a cosmetic renovation. It's an entire philosophy of what hospitality should be in our modern world, authentic, personal, rooted in culture and humanity." She looked each person present in the eye. "I understand the financial concerns. I understand the prudence. But watering down this vision means destroying its very essence." Wesley cleared his throat, ready to intervene, but Eleanor raised a hand. "I'm not finished. Upon reflection, I think it's best that I temporarily withdraw from this project." A murmur of surprise ran through the assembly. Harrison sat up abruptly, his face reflecting a sudden concern. "I cannot defend a half measure in which I don't believe," she continued firmly. "If the board decides to follow Wesley's recommendation, I will respect that decision, but I cannot participate in it. I need time to reflect on my role within this family and this business." Virginia was observing her with unusual intensity. "And where will you go during this reflection?" "To Savannah, my home." "For how long?" The question came from Harrison, his voice tense. Eleanor looked at him, feeling a wave of sadness overcome her. "I don't know." A heavy silence followed her declaration. Finally, against all expectations, it was Virginia who spoke. "I request that this meeting be adjourned," she declared, her tone brooking no contradiction. "Eleanor, would you grant me a private interview?" "Now?" Surprised, Eleanor nodded, following the matriarch out of the room and into a small adjacent parlor. Virginia closed the door behind them, then turned to her daughter-in-law with an indefinable expression. "You're really leaving?" she asked. "Yes." "Because you didn't get exactly what you wanted?" Eleanor felt anger rise within her, but she contained it. "No, because I can't continue pretending to be someone I'm not." To her great surprise, Virginia smiled slightly. "And that's exactly why you shouldn't leave." Virginia Blackwell stood before the window of the parlor, observing the historic district below, her aristocratic profile outlined against the light. For the first time, Eleanor noticed the subtle signs of fatigue on this usually impenetrable face. Slight shadows under the eyes, more pronounced lines around the mouth. "Do you know why I chose this hotel as the pilot for your project?" Virginia suddenly asked without turning around. "Because it was in financial difficulty," replied Eleanor, uncertain of the direction this conversation was taking. "Partly." Virginia finally turned toward her. "But mainly because this is where it all began. I don't understand." "The Blackwell Empire." Her hand made an elegant gesture encompassing the building. "My father-in-law started with this hotel 60 years ago. He was a simple innkeeper who saved all his life to buy it. At the time, it was a modest establishment that welcomed ordinary travelers, families, penniless artists. It offered authentic hospitality, exactly what you're trying to recreate." Eleanor sat slowly, absorbing this unexpected revelation. "When my husband took over the business," continued Virginia, "he wanted to expand it, create something more prestigious. Each new acquisition took us a little further from that initial simplicity." She sighed. "And when Harrison and Wesley took over after his death, the transformation was complete. We had become exactly like all the other luxury chains, elegant, impersonal, interchangeable." She approached Eleanor, sitting across from her with measured grace. Your project isn't revolutionary, Eleanor. It's a return to our roots. That's why I supported it, despite Wesley's protests. Then why did you allow them to sabotage me yesterday? Because I wanted to see your reaction. Virginia's eyes, usually cold, now shone with an almost fierce light. I wanted to see if you would fight for your vision, or if you would bend like Audrey, completed Eleanor, suddenly understanding. Like Audrey. Like so many others who have entered this family thinking they could change it, but who ended up being changed by it. Virginia leaned forward. Do you know what happened last night after you left? Eleanor shook her head. Harrison and Wesley had the most violent argument of their lives. Harrison defended your vision with a passion I had never seen in him. An unexpected smile softened her face. He threatened to leave the company if your project wasn't respected in its entirety. Eleanor's surprise must have been visible, for Virginia gave a small, dry laugh. Yes, your silent husband finally found his voice, but only after you had found yours. Eleanor digested this information, feeling a confusion of emotions. Pride, relief, but also persistence of doubt. He should have told me. Blackwell men are not adept at expressing their feelings, conceded Virginia with a grimace. A flaw I perhaps encouraged, I admit. She rose, smoothing her skirt with an automatic gesture. But that's not the only reason I wanted to talk to you. I have something to show you. Virginia went to her handbag and extracted an envelope that she handed to Eleanor. Inside was a letter dated 2 weeks earlier. What is this? The results of my medical exams. Virginia's voice was calm, factual. I have pancreatic cancer, advanced stage. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe a year. The shock hit Eleanor like an icy wave. Virginia, I'm so sorry. I'm not seeking your pity, she replied, but without the usual harshness. I'm telling you this because circumstances compel me to accelerate certain decisions. She resumed her seat, her gaze direct and unveiled. I've spent my life protecting this family legacy, sometimes at the expense of my own children's happiness. I pushed Harrison to abandon his dreams of writing. I tolerated Wesley becoming the ruthless man he is today. I let my daughters transform into superficial versions of myself. She took a deep breath. And now I see this business that I sought so hard to preserve becoming an empty shell without soul. Eleanor remained silent, intuitively understanding that this confession was as rare as it was precious. Your project, continued Virginia, is the last chance to give meaning to all this, to return to what made the Blackwell hotels special originally. She fixed Eleanor intensely. I need you, Eleanor. The family needs you. Not just to save the business, but to save the Blackwells from themselves. I'm not sure I can carry this burden, confessed Eleanor, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this unexpected responsibility. You already carry it. Virginia leaned over to take her hands, a gesture of unprecedented intimacy. I resisted you. I tried to mold you in my image, as I molded everyone who entered this family. But your stubbornness, your refusal to conform, these qualities that I initially despised are exactly what we desperately need. Silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken words and possibilities. Finally, Eleanor asked the question that burned her lips. Why tell me all this now? Because time is running out for me, responded Virginia simply. And because you're about to make a mistake I know too well. What mistake? Fleeing when things become difficult. Virginia's gaze softened, revealing a vulnerability Eleanor would never have thought possible. That's what I did 40 years ago when I discovered my husband was having an affair. I took my children and left for almost a year. When I returned, something had irreparably broken between us. We continued to live together, to work together, but as strangers sharing a name. She gently squeezed Eleanor's hands. Don't repeat my mistakes. If you leave now in anger and disappointment, something will break between you and Harrison that perhaps can never be repaired. The tears Eleanor had held back all day now threatened to overflow. I feel like he doesn't trust me, that he doesn't really see me. He sees you, affirmed Virginia with surprising conviction. Perhaps more clearly than anyone else, but he's caught between two worlds, the one in which he was raised with its rigid rules and crushing expectations, and the one you've shown him, made of possibilities and authenticity. She rose, signaling the end of this extraordinary conversation. The meeting will resume in an hour. I'll leave you to reflect on what I've told you. Whatever your decision, I'll respect it. Eleanor remained alone in the parlor, the envelope containing Virginia's secret resting on her knees like a tangible weight. The decision she had to make now seemed infinitely more complex than a simple choice between leaving or staying. Eleanor walked along the Charleston waterfront, her thoughts as turbulent as the harbor waters after a storm. Virginia's confession had upended her perception of the situation, adding layers of complexity to what she thought she understood. The sun was beginning to descend toward the horizon, bathing the historic district's facades in golden light. Couples strolled hand in hand, families fed the seagulls, students animatedly discussed on benches, scenes of ordinary life that suddenly seemed precious and meaningful. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Harrison. She hesitated before answering, uncertain of what she wanted to tell him. "Eleanor?" His voice was tense, worried. "Where are you?" "I'm walking. I needed to think." "Your suitcase." He paused. "I saw your suitcase in our room. Are you really leaving?" She stopped, watching a tourist boat glide on the water, filled with visitors frantically capturing photos. "I don't know yet." "Don't leave." The words rushed out, as if he feared not having time to pronounce them. "I know I disappointed you, that I should have defended you immediately. I was a coward. Your mother told me that you and Wesley argued." A brief silence. "Yes, I should have done it in front of you, not after you left. I'm sorry." Eleanor sighed, searching for the right words. "It's not just about yesterday, Harrison, it's deeper. Sometimes I feel like we're living parallel lives that only intersect at moments." "I know." His voice softened. "These last months have been difficult. But I don't want to lose you, Eleanor, not like this." "Your mother is ill," she said abruptly, unable to keep this information to herself. A pause. "She told you? You knew?" "Only for a few days. She asked me and Wesley not to tell anyone." He sighed deeply. "It's another reason why I hesitated yesterday. I didn't want to add to the chaos." Eleanor now better understood his behavior, but the emotional distance remained. "What do you really want, Harrison? Not what your family expects of you, not what's most prudent for the business. What you want." The question, the same Phoebe had asked her the previous evening, hung between them like a challenge. "I want—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "I want to rediscover the man I was meant to be, the one who wrote stories in Key West cafes and dreamed of changing the world with words. I want to stop pretending that prestige and profits are more important than authenticity. I want to build something meaningful with you, not just a facade of a marriage or a soulless business." His sincerity touched her deeply. "Then why not do it? What's stopping you? Fear, I suppose." His laugh was joyless. "Fear of disappointing, of losing everything, of discovering I no longer have what it takes to be that man." Eleanor was now watching the sun disappear behind the city skyline, its last rays igniting the sky with purple and orange. A sudden clarity imposed itself on her. "Meet me at the hotel in an hour," she said, a decision forming in her mind. "There's something I need to do first." Without waiting for his response, she hung up and headed with determined steps toward a specific destination, a small artisanal printing shop she had discovered during her explorations of the city. The owner, an old man passionate about his craft, welcomed her with surprise at this late hour. "Mrs. Blackwell, what can I do for you?" "I need an urgent service, Mr. Atkins. Can you print this for tomorrow morning?" She handed him a USB drive containing a document she had begun drafting during her sleepless nights in Charleston, a personal project she hadn't mentioned to anyone. An hour later, she rejoined Harrison in the hotel lobby. He was waiting, visibly tense, an envelope in hand. "What's that?" she asked, indicating the envelope. "Something I should have shown you long ago." He handed her the document. "It's the reason why I insisted so much on you taking charge of the Charleston project." Inside was a detailed analysis he had commissioned 6 months earlier, evaluating luxury hotel market trends. The report, written by renowned consultants, concluded that the future belonged to establishments offering authentic and personalized experiences, exactly what Eleanor had intuitively proposed. "You knew," she murmured, scanning the pages. "You knew I was right even before I proposed the idea. I suspected you would see what we had all missed." He smiled shyly. "You've always had this ability to perceive the essence of things. It's one of the countless reasons why I love you." Eleanor looked up from the document, her expression unreadable. "You should have trusted me, told me." "I know." I was afraid you'd think I was manipulating the situation, using you to impose my vision without taking the risk myself. He shook his head, frustrated by his own actions. I did exactly what I feared. A silence settled between them, neither comfortable nor hostile, a space of shared reflection. The meeting resumes in 20 minutes, Eleanor finally said. What are we going to do? Harrison looked at her with new determination. We'll defend your vision. Together this time. If the board doesn't accept it, I've decided to leave the general management. What? Eleanor's surprise was total. You can't abandon the family business. I'm not abandoning it. I'm saving it from obsolescence. His gaze was firm. Sometimes you have to be ready to risk everything for what truly matters. You taught me that. Eleanor felt a powerful emotion rise within her, a mix of pride, love, and resolution. She took his hand. Let's go together. The conference room was packed when they entered. Not only was the board of directors present, but also the department heads of the Charleston Hotel, summoned by Virginia herself. The matriarch opened the session with quiet authority. Before making a decision on the future of the project, I thought it would be wise to hear from those who have implemented it daily. One by one, the employees testified. The chef who had rediscovered his passion for Southern cuisine, the chambermaid whose knowledge of local history now enriched the guests' experience, the musical doorman who now hosted music evenings in the salon. Their sincere testimonies created an atmosphere that graphs and financial projections could never have generated. They spoke not just of improved figures, but of rediscovered pride, sense of work, joy in coming each morning. When the moment for the final decision came, Harrison rose, Eleanor at his side. For years, he began, his voice carrying a new assurance, we've managed this business as if its sole purpose was to generate profits and prestige. We've forgotten why my grandfather opened his first hotel, to offer a warm refuge, a place where travelers would feel at home. He looked at each board member. What my wife has created here isn't a risky experiment. It's a return to our core values, adapted to the modern world, and I support her unreservedly. He paused, taking a deep breath. If the board does not approve the extension of this concept to all of our properties, I will resign from my position as general manager. A stunned murmur ran through the assembly. Wesley rose abruptly. This is emotional blackmail. No, Wesley, calmly intervened Virginia. It's leadership, something I would have liked to see earlier. She turned to the board. I propose an immediate vote. Those in favor of extending Eleanor's project to all of our properties, raise your hand. Hands rose one by one, first timidly, then with more assurance. In the end, only Wesley and 2 conservative administrators had abstained. The motion is approved, declared Virginia with a rare smile. Congratulations, Eleanor. You have just officially redefined the future of Blackwell Hotels. In the buzz of excitement that followed, Eleanor seized the moment to approach Wesley, who stood apart, visibly disgruntled. I'd like us to work together on this project, she told him softly. Your financial expertise is essential to its long-term success. He stared at her with surprise. Why would you want to collaborate with me after everything I've done? Because we're a family, she smiled. And because you're brilliant, even if you're sometimes insufferable. A reluctant smile appeared on his usually severe face. You're either crazy or much wiser than your age suggests. Probably a bit of both, she admitted with a laugh. The meeting concluded in an atmosphere of cautious celebration. As participants dispersed, Eleanor approached Virginia. Thank you, she said simply. Don't thank me yet. Virginia observed her with a mix of pride and apprehension. The real work starts now, and I won't always be here to calm the storms. I know. Eleanor hesitated, then added softly, but while you are here, I'd like to learn from you. For the first time since Eleanor had known her, Virginia seemed truly moved. I would be honored. That evening, Harrison and Eleanor dined alone on the terrace of their suite, Charleston's lights twinkling below them like an inverted starry sky. A bottle of local wine between them, they savored a moment of peace after the storm. I haven't unpacked my suitcase, Eleanor admitted, breaking a comfortable silence. Harrison looked at her, a silent question in his eyes. I wanted to be sure, she explained, sure that I was staying for the right reasons, not out of obligation or fear. And now? She smiled, taking his hand across the table. Now I'm sure. The 6 months that followed were the most intense of Eleanor's life. The transformation project, initially limited to the Charleston Hotel, extended to 3 other properties: the majestic establishment in Napa Valley, the elegant palace in Santa Barbara, and the medieval castle near Boston. Eleanor traveled constantly, sleeping on trains, working in cars, eating on the run between meetings. She had surrounded herself with a small dedicated team: Griffin from Charleston, a visionary interior architect discovered in Atlanta, a former food critic converted to culinary consultant, and, against all odds, Wesley himself. Their collaboration had begun in mutual distrust, but had transformed into a surprisingly effective partnership. Where Eleanor saw creative possibilities, Wesley identified the financial means to realize them. His contacts in the business world opened doors she could never have crossed alone. His rigor complemented her intuition. "You know I was wrong about you, don't you?" he confided one evening as they worked late in the New York office, surrounded by plans and financial projections. Eleanor looked up from her computer, surprised by this unexpected confession. "I thought you were just—" He hesitated, searching for words. "An opportunist? Her naive girl who had seduced your brother?" He had the decency to look embarrassed. "Something like that. And now?" "Now I think you're exactly what this family needed." He looked at her with new respect. "What I needed too, perhaps. You reminded me why we did this work in the first place." This recognition, coming from the man who had been her fiercest opponent, meant more to Eleanor than all the compliments from critics and journalists who now took interest in their project. The specialized press had indeed begun to enthuse about what they called the Blackwell Revolution. An influential hotel industry magazine had dedicated its cover to Eleanor, calling her a visionary who is reinventing American luxury. Interview requests piled up on her desk, but most significant for her was the call from a New York publisher, intrigued by her approach. He proposed she write a book about her philosophy of hospitality and authenticity in an increasingly standardized world. When she hesitated, uncertain of having the time or legitimacy for such a project, Harrison encouraged her with surprising fervor. "You must do it," he insisted. "What you have to say goes beyond our hotels. It's a vision of what human experience can be in a world that too often values efficiency at the expense of connection." His enthusiasm touched her deeply, all the more so as she knew what writing represented for him, that abandoned dream he still carried within himself. One evening, as they finally reunited in their New York apartment after weeks of separate travels, Eleanor handed him an envelope. "What's this?" he asked, intrigued. "Open it." Inside was a publishing contract, not for her but for him. The subject mentioned was a collection of stories he had written during his university years and that she had discovered in his library. "How—" He looked at her, stunned. "I had my publisher read your texts," she explained, beaming. "He found them extraordinary. He wants to publish them." Harrison remained silent, staring at the contract as if it were an impossible object to comprehend. "You don't have to accept," she quickly added. "I know it was perhaps presumptuous of me, but you read my stories." His voice was strange, almost vulnerable. "Yes. They're beautiful, Harrison. You have a gift you shouldn't keep hidden." He rose abruptly, crossed the room to the window, turning his back to her. For a terrible moment, Eleanor feared she had committed an unforgivable error, that she had crossed an invisible line. Then she saw his shoulders tremble slightly. She approached gently, placing a hand on his arm. "Harrison?" He turned to her, and she saw silent tears flowing down his face. "No one had ever—" He broke off, overwhelmed by emotion. "I thought I had buried this part of myself so deeply that it no longer existed." Eleanor embraced him, feeling the tension in his body, then his gradual relaxation against her. "It still exists. It always has." That night they talked until dawn, not about work or ongoing projects, but about old and new dreams, confessed fears, shared hopes. For the first time in their marriage, the age difference between them seemed insignificant, for they were finally meeting as equals, each with something precious to offer the other. The real surprise came a few weeks later, during a visit to Virginia in the hospital where she was receiving treatments. Despite her illness, she remained involved in the business, examining reports from her hospital bed, offering wise advice by phone. That day, however, she seemed particularly tired, her features emaciated by pain she struggled to hide. "I've made a decision," she announced without preamble when Eleanor and Harrison sat beside her bed. "I'm restructuring the company's governance." Harrison stiffened, perhaps anticipating a decision that would favor Wesley, as had often been the case in the past. "Starting next month, the group's presidency will be shared between Harrison and Eleanor," she continued, her tone brooking no discussion. "Wesley will retain financial direction, but you two will define the strategic vision. Together." Eleanor exchanged an astonished look with Harrison. "Virginia, I'm not sure I'm qualified to—" "Nonsense," interrupted the matriarch with a spark of her former authority. "You've proven your intelligence and instinct. You've earned the respect of the team and the board. And above all, you have this rare quality of seeing beyond appearances, of perceiving what could be rather than what is." She looked at her son. "And you have finally found the courage to follow your convictions. Together, you form exactly the leadership this family needs." Harrison took his mother's hand, visibly moved. "Are you sure about this?" "More sure than I've been of anything in years." Her gaze passed from one to the other. "Just promise me one thing." "Anything you want," assured Harrison. "Never forget why you do this work. It's not for money or prestige. It's to create places where people can feel truly welcomed, recognized, connected." She squeezed their hands weakly. "That's the only thing that matters in the end, the way we treat each other." On the way back in the car that returned them through New York, Eleanor and Harrison remained silent, absorbing the magnitude of this unexpected change. "Are you ready for this?" Harrison finally asked. Eleanor looked out the window at the bustling streets, the crowded cafes, the anonymous faces, all those people seeking their place in the world, just as she had done. "I think so," she replied softly. "If we do it together." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Together, then." That evening they celebrated, not in a starred restaurant or exclusive club, but in their kitchen, preparing a simple dinner together with ingredients bought at the neighborhood market. They ate on the terrace under the stars, sharing a bottle of Georgia wine they had kept for a special occasion. "To us," proposed Harrison, raising his glass. "To us," confirmed Eleanor, the crystal tinkling softly in the New York night. A year later, Eleanor stood on the balcony of their suite at the Charleston Blackwell Hotel, observing the first light of dawn illuminate the church steeples. At 23, she carried a quiet confidence that contrasted with the uncertainty of the young Savannah bookseller she had been. The French door opened behind her, and Harrison joined her, 2 steaming cups of coffee in hand. At 39, he had changed too. A few more grey hairs, but especially a new serenity in his gaze, as if he had finally found a long-sought balance. "You're up early," he remarked, handing her a cup. "I wanted to see the sunrise over the steeples." She smiled. "Exactly 1 year after it all began here." He leaned against the balustrade beside her, their shoulders lightly touching. What a year! Indeed, the past 12 months had been extraordinary. The concept of authenticity developed by Eleanor had extended to all the group's hotels, each celebrating the unique essence of its region. Financial results had exceeded all projections, attracting international attention. Eleanor's book on authentic hospitality had been published in 12 languages, becoming a reference in the industry. As for Harrison's collection of stories, it had received glowing reviews, encouraging him to begin a novel he now wrote each morning before starting his workday. Their joint presidency of the group had established a new leadership model, combining Eleanor's creative vision and Harrison's strategic experience. Even Wesley, initially skeptical, had embraced this change, finding new satisfaction in his role as financial director. But the deepest change concerned their relationship. The distance that had settled between them at the beginning of the Charleston adventure had given way to a more authentic intimacy, built on mutual recognition of their strengths and weaknesses. The differences that once seemed insurmountable, of age, experience, background, had become enriching complementarities. "Do you have regrets?" Harrison suddenly asked, contemplating the awakening city. Eleanor reflected, savoring the warmth of the cup in her hands. "I regret that your mother isn't here to see all we've accomplished." Virginia had died 3 months earlier, peacefully in her sleep, after battling her illness with fierce dignity. Her last months had been marked by a reconciliation with her children, by deep conversations they had too long avoided, by an appeasement of old grudges. She knew, affirmed Harrison gently. She saw the beginning of the transformation. She knew we were on the right path. Eleanor nodded, feeling the truth of these words. And you, regrets? He put an arm around her shoulders, drawing her to him. Only that I didn't understand sooner what you were offering me. Not just your love, but permission to be authentically myself. They remained thus in comfortable silence, watching the sun gradually rise in the sky, gilding Charleston's rooftops. Below, the hotel was coming to life, the first guests descending for breakfast, staff greeting each other warmly, this living community they had helped create. I have something for you, said Eleanor, turning to him with a mysterious smile. She extracted a small envelope from her dress pocket. Harrison opened it, discovering a simple card containing a handwritten quote. True love isn't about ages, grand gestures, or eternal promises. It's about daily respect, consistent choices, space for mutual growth. Beneath these words, Eleanor had added, Preface to my next book? Harrison looked at her, intrigued. You're writing another book? Not exactly. Her eyes shone with contained emotion. It's more like a new chapter. She took his hand and gently placed it on her abdomen. He looked at her without understanding. Then comprehension illuminated his face. She nodded, tears in her eyes. We are. He embraced her, almost lifting her from the ground in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, his eyes were wet too. It's wonderful. You're not worried? She asked, expressing the concern that had inhabited her since she discovered her pregnancy. With our responsibilities, our constant travels, we'll find a way, he assured with quiet conviction. As we always have. She smiled, comforted by his confidence. Her new adventure, then? The most important of all, he confirmed, tenderly caressing her cheek, and as always, we'll write it together. They turned again toward the horizon, where the sun now shone fully, illuminating the city with its generous light. A new day was beginning, full of possibilities, uncertainties too, but above all a shared promise. Eleanor thought of her journey, from the small Savannah bookshop to the New York boardrooms, from crushing doubts to this hard-won confidence. She thought of the 21-year-old woman, intimidated by crystal flutes and condescending looks, who had found the courage to remain true to herself. And she finally understood what Virginia had tried to tell her during their last private conversation, a few days before her death. True luxury, my dear, is not in the objects we possess, but in the freedom to be fully ourselves and to offer that same freedom to others. Harrison placed a kiss on her forehead, interrupting her reflections. What are you thinking about? Us, she replied simply. This long road we've traveled together, and the road that opens before us, he added, gently placing his hand on her abdomen. Eleanor nodded, feeling a rare fullness invade her. In this perfect moment, bathed in the morning's golden light, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place, not in the luxurious world of the Blackwells, nor in the simplicity of her native Savannah, but in this unique space she had created at the intersection of the two, a space of authenticity where she could be entirely herself. I love you, she murmured, the simple words carrying the weight of all they had been through. And I love you, he responded, his gaze reflecting the same depth of emotion, more than you could ever imagine. Their silhouettes stood out against the luminous sky, no longer separated by different worlds, but united in a common story. They continued to write together day after day, choice after choice, with courage, respect, and that authentic love that transcended all differences.